there's no level of status that's satisfactory, right? For more than a temporary period of time.
You know, Influence by Robert Cialdini breaks this down. It's like the influence of other people around us makes that elevation pitch.
That's hugely important, isn't it? It's who you spend your time with as well, who you choose to learn from, who you have around you, because you're just a product of that at the end of the day.
I'm trying to detach the creative side with it, with the, I need to make this work because I need to exist in the world. And that goes back to human psychology, which is like, we need to fundamentally like actually live. And that means we have that never ending pursuit, right? Because we're so used to.
Before we start this podcast, I have one little favor to ask you. Can you please hit the subscribe button down below so we can help more people every single week? Thank you.
Where I want to start is, do you think we're stripping like the creativity out of the world?
It depends how you define the world, because the world is just our perception, right? It's the world is exactly how an individual sees it. And so, you know, if you were to look through the eyes of a member of the general public in the Western world, let's take a middle-class Westerner who's probably on social media 5-6 hours a day. Certainly the younger generation, because that's what they've been brought up with. And you were to put them in the limelight and ask the same question, or at least we were to make them the subject of the question, I'd say yes. I don't think creativity means what it used to mean, for sure. I don't think it's as authentic or as original as it used to be. And there's a huge difference between being unique and being original. Because everything's so ubiquitous these days that we live in an age of abundance, and creativity is no different. You know, you have people doing courses on how to be creative these days. And it's like, well, for me, that kind of takes the meaning of being creative out of it, right? If you learn how to create ideas, then for me, that is the antithesis of creativity. So look, I don't know. It's a very good question to open up with. I feel like a true creator is of more value these days, put it that way.
The reason why I think the term like creator like even exists right now is because it's creative in a vacuum, right? Like creative within social media is not creative in the artistic sense. Like when I look at your photos and the documentation that you've put together and the travels you've done, especially in the Middle East, like that is creative, right? Because you're like literally going around the desert and sand to try to find that creative angle. Whereas I think creativity is like looked at through like a vacuum. And I give you a simple, stupid example would be like running an ad. Running an ad, they have the creative, which is the image. And then people think that because they change that, it's creativity as a result. And like, how do you think about that, right? Because my kind of view is like, there's like sparks of creativity within the activity, but it's completely different than the art of being creative.
Actually, it's the art of being bored. That's really where creativity stems from, or at least used to. You know, nowadays, exactly how you said, and people conflate inspiration with emulation. And you can have an inspiration, but you should try not to emulate that or plagiarize it, even worse, right? So I don't know, the definition of creativity is extremely vast, and it's probably changing all the time. It's way overused these days. It's, you know, I'm a creator here, I'm a creator there. And what does that mean? You know, I did a video about this the other day, and it does get frustrating. And I don't even think I'm a true creative. I take inspirations. We all do. Whenever we wake up, we're inundated with sensations, thoughts that come from nowhere. You know, so there's no like, a lot of it is, I saw your post today about status. A lot of it comes down to status. Like, I'm a creative, as if there's some kind of kudos to that. It's like, that's really cool being creative. It's just like, no, it's even if you are a true creative, I don't believe that's of any intrinsic value that you've created, excuse the pun, because you are who you are. You are not able to change that. You were born into a family. You were born into family, whether it's good, bad, somewhere in the middle. You cannot create your own thoughts. All you can do is choose, you know, responsible and maybe creative decisions based off those thoughts and philosophies. You know, you don't choose to pick up a book every day. You think you do, but you have a thought, I fancy doing some reading, right? So when it comes to creativity, I don't really know how to answer that. I know that it rubs me up the wrong way when it gets
Why?
this, because I I like nice things. I like discernment. I like quality, and I like standards. And too many times and too many people these days put that in the negative column. It's derogatory, you're snobby, you're elitist, as if it's something bad that we should talk about or even think about. I like to have things that we label excellent. I like to have people that we label geniuses or masters, right? In which case, people have worked their whole lives to get to a certain point through strife, through good times, through bad times, through whatever trauma they might have, through anything, right? Where they've worked for so long to get where they want to, or at least be proud of a body of work, let's say. And then it gets completely stripped from underneath them by things like social media, influencers, people who call themselves creatives when they're not really creatives. They're doing it for, their definition of success. That's why it rubs me up, because creativity is talked about these days as if it's a success feature on social media. It's a status thing more than it is a true form of art or a true form of creativity, something that you actually create from scratch that is original to yourself.
So that pursuit of something creative, like, the never ending, like lifetime infinite game of creating something, and you're always continuously getting better, can also be taken into the context of building something, right? Because if you're building something adjacent, it's like you're always playing the game. It's a commitment, it's mastery, basically.
Absolutely.
It's mastery, but it's mastery with a different purpose or a different end goal. So like there's the artist who follows mastery, wants to become excellent at what they do, whether it's photography, painting, whatever. And there's the other side, which is more like the profit-driven individual who's seeking mastery for an outcome to do with profit, right? Or to do economically. Where do you draw distinction just in the mastery piece of that pursuit, right? Because they're both trying to be excellent at something, or add in a third vertical. Let's say an athlete, right? I mentioned before, I was bodybuilding. I was also a sprinter as a kid. Usain Bolt is, you would nearly almost say artistic in the way he ran and the way he trained, the way he pursued mastery. What's the difference there, or the similarity? Is it largely similar?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive. And I think, if you touched on entrepreneurship, which is probably the essence of creativity, if you're starting a business, and even better, if you've got your own idea for a business, what better form of creativity is that? You start from this tiny little root, and your goal of, plenty of trees that last hundreds of years, that is the essence of creativity. So I don't think and this is my problem, is that when people talk about creativity, they conflate it with digital presence, online status, and that's why it kind of goes into the art world. So I think, to answer your question, I think that there is no real distinction. You can find I've talked about this on my videos. You can find creativity in any form of life. Now, whether someone like Usain Bolt would be called a creator, I certainly would call him an artist for sure. Whether that means he's, he has an excellent level of creativity imbued in that, I don't know. I don't know enough about his, let's be honest, a lot of it's genetics. And then he went from having a genetic base level to being superhuman, right? That, I don't know what encompassed that difference. So I probably couldn't comment, but that there is artistry and creativity in literally every form of life. That's what makes life fucking amazing.
And I don't follow football. I think it's just a waste of time, but that's why people call it the beautiful game, because when it's played properly, it's elegant. Do you get me? It's elegance though. You see an amazing football player or whatever, it's elegant the way they move around it. Obviously the execution is different. Let's go back to status. So the reason I wrote that, which is basically everything in life is to do with an elevation of status, and everyone is driven by status. And the reason why I said that is because my perspective, and many others, and I've got this from other people, is that the actions we take is to elevate our status, but we don't make other actions to decrease our status in society. So people want to move away from moving down a level. That's why people stay shitty relationships, shitty jobs. They don't take opportunity. That's why people wear designer clothes, or they go to the best bars, or they get certain coffee. It's because it's a perceived increase in status. And deep down, that's a big psychological trigger to market to, because when you're marketing a solution, you can say, hey, like, do you want this new watch? And then people's perception will be say, okay, this is going to elevate my status. And that's like an age-old like marketing thing, which how people move up the status ladder. Now, I want to get your thoughts on that, because you drive or you fly jets, right? And private planes. You've probably seen status at its highest end in terms of like wealth and people's individuals. Like, how do you think about that? Because that's nearly at odds to what you do in your private life, which is photography. It's on both ends of the spectrum.
I think it's the root of all evil and suffering, to be honest. I think, well, the pursuit of it, because there's no level of status that's satisfactory, right? For more than a temporary period of time. I've never seen it. I've never seen the argument against that statement. So, and I've lived it, right? When I first started flying private jets, I thought I was the fucking Big Easy, you know? I was like, yeah, I've made it, you know? And I would swan around in my uniform, or I'd swan around in my private life with a Rolex on and buying everyone drinks and, you know, being an utter prick, basically. So I know, you know, I turned away from that a lot in the last kind of 4 or 5 years, because I was very unhappy, you know. And so I don't believe that status has any kind of beneficial property to human existence. And at the root of all that is just desire, right? It's just desire to go from one level to the next level to satisfy our ego. So I see it all the time, and I feel sorry for these people, and knowing that I know how it feels. And I still wake up every day fighting it. You know, there is a business is great examples. Like, well, you can come and look at my business. You know, it's not, you know, most of it is just fulfillment, pride, enjoying the process, and hopefully the revenue and the profits at the end of the day. But there's definitely still some there. Like you mentioned coffee. Like, I'm obsessed with coffee. I've been learning about coffee for 10 years. But there's always an element of, look at the clothes I'm wearing, look at the coffee I'm serving, look how cool this is. You know, it's like that is all status. So look, I'm one to shy away from the Western construct of status, how we're brought up. I'm sure how you were brought up, in terms of not in a blaming or negative kind of way, just that's the way our parents thought they had to bring us up. That's the way the society dictated that we were kind of brought up, or at least expected to move through life with full-time job. You know, the education system is a complete joke. The formal education system is a joke, and I went through it. I loved it, but I look back now and go, I didn't do anything with anything that I learned. I've learned more in my last 5 years, 10 years than I did 20 years at school. You know?
And that's important, right? That's why you are where you are, though, because at 41, right, you're learning more. But how much people put down the education fucking toolbox after they finish school, right? And like, that's why like a self-education will make you like a living, formal education, all the way around. Self-education will make you a killing, formal education make you a living. But, and I mean to interrupt you on that, but I think what's interesting is the fact that those things that we're bought into, they're conditioned, right? So like going to university, which I bought the ticket, going into those jobs, which I bought the ticket, that's a condition to you. Same with buying the mortgage, buying the house, buying the car, and it's keeping up with the Joneses, right? And as you know, influenced by Robert Cialdini breaks this down. It's like the influence of other people around us makes that elevation pitch. And that's probably why like you're probably having a little bit of looking at your own industry in photography saying, well, these guys are just doing it for more likes and more engagement, but it's almost like an elevation of status continuously. So it's just an interesting way to think about it, because like a lot of all drivers, as you mentioned, comes from other people, but it's about having that discernment and picking individuals that you actually want to follow, but not emulate at the same time. Like, how do you think about that?
That's hugely important, isn't it? Is who you spend your time with as well, who you choose to learn from, who you have around you, because you're just a product of that at the end of the day, especially as an adult. And that's one reason why, I don't know about you, but one reason why I moved away from the UK. We were in this, suddenly wake up, we're in this fucking rat race through no choice of our own. Like, well, I've got to get the house. I've got to get the mortgage. I'm debted up to my eyeballs just to say that I've got a house to fit in with my peers, right? It's ludicrous.
And then you need the Range Rover that's 2023, not 2022.
But that's the first. You go back home now, and all they talk about is, you know, they compare kids for a start, and then they go, you know, what car have you got? and they've got a huge debt on their car, or they've got a huge debt on their house, and then it's a house off, right? It's who's got the bigger house, where that house is. It's crazy. So yeah, coming back to your point about the photography industry, I just don't see a photography industry anymore. It's I don't know what it is, but it's a status game. It's just a rush for status. And so, look, I'm not saying I'm perfect in any way, and I understand where these challenges come from and why people struggle with it and why people fall into it. But I just don't think I don't think anything good comes from it.
It's interesting, right? Because without like an economic driver, historically, like society hasn't moved forward, right? Because if there's an economic driver, we've innovated, like we found like cures for medicine, we've added in food, added ways to like produce food, going back like time and time again.
Yeah,
right?
I know where you're going with it. That's different though.
No, I know. But what I'm trying to say is that there's been like that pursuit to like make new stuff better. But then on a side to that, they're trying to add in like creativity to that. So let's take an iPhone, right? Like the way like Steve Jobs put 1,000 songs in your pocket, right? That was like creative and that art. But then the fact that now going forward, it's like everything has to go back to those premises for it to move forward is where there's like a problem. Do you get me? There's a problem it's a problem solution continuum. So it was like, so basically taking a step back from this is like, how can you actually become more creative without like selling your soul, basically? How do you think about that?
I think you have to learn to be bored. I think this is why you have courses of how to be creative. It's just the wrong way to go about it. And I don't want to get too spiritual. I'm not that spiritual, but I enjoy time with myself. I enjoy time in a quiet room. And most days I make a deliberate practice of it, because I think if you ask any successful or prominent artist these days the same question, and it's either a mental health struggle that they have to get through, and from that blossoms creativity, because they spend so much time in a screwed up place that this just comes, ideas come, thoughts come, voices come. Or it's they spend time in solitude. They spend time sitting, writing, thinking, and from that, it would be it is amazing just having 10 minutes by yourself with no devices, nothing around you, is so powerful to be creative. I'm just talking about creativity here. Let alone if you try 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, just sit around, no devices, and try it.
Do you write?
Yeah, I write every day.
How much? Like, what would you write about? Is there any framework you use?
I write poems maybe once every few weeks. Something comes to mind, so I sit down and have a good, just kind of hash out for an hour. I journal every day. And that's it. I mean, I'll go some days where I feel like writing whatever comes to mind, right? I mean, I'm writing every day, notes, ideas. My memory is really bad. So I'll always have like a notebook, or if I'm at my laptop, my notes open, just because if something comes in, I need to, otherwise I forget it. And then I get frustrated and angry that I've forgotten it. So, I think back in the day, creativity was something that was, almost organic, and there wasn't kind of, you were either very much a creative or you weren't. Now it's just the rush because it's cool, or there's a status attached to it, or there's money attached to it. I mean, coming back to what you're talking about in terms of capitalism, essentially, if there's money attached to something, then the flock will go there, right? And so that's what happened with digital media, with social media, with YouTube especially, and people were going, wow, I can fucking make money from talking from home, making videos. That is brilliant. I mean, I do it, you do it. It's fun. You can get your voice out there, and I think that's brilliant for the world. But what that does, it just homogenizes creativity a little bit more.
Because you almost come down to what's working, right?
Yeah, you now create for an algorithm. I don't care what you say. Wherever everything gets put online, right? When was the last time people went to galleries and exhibitions and museums? And I always try and make a point of doing that if I can, certainly in the big cities I go to, because it just brings you down to earth. And I miss that. As a 41-year-old, I feel old saying that kind of thing, but I miss film photography. I miss film is cool these days. So it's like, I don't want to shy away from trends, but as soon as a trend comes and it becomes popularized, you don't really want. I don't really want it. Like it's. I mean, it may be fun, but it's not a pursuit that I think is unique or anymore, and therefore very valuable. The valuable things in this world are unique and original at best. So, the same with businesses. You can create the same business as that next successful business, but you can be more of a success if you have a little uniqueness. That could be the CEO, it could be a system, it could be a price point, it could be any part of it, right? That's unique. So I think we don't place enough, we as in the Western world don't place enough value on uniqueness because we think it's elitist. And we think, why should that person be better than me? Why should that person have more than me? So going back to, what you're talking about, status, I think that, if you were to, I mean, there's so many stats you can throw around here, but giving back is one of those things. You talk about dropping status. Like if you're one that gives away to charity or does things for charity, you guys included, us included, there is a level of status that doesn't necessarily come with that unless you shout about it. And then you're just a prick, right? The real heroes in the world do those good things without anyone knowing about it, right? They're the gems in this world. And so there is nothing wrong with people making $1 billion if they give 90% of that away to charity, right? But they don't. They don't, because we live in a world of greed and status. And I'm all for creating businesses, creating wealth, moving things forward, evolving society. But as long as we give some of that back to the people that need it, and I just don't see that anymore. It's just a race to the bottom, but a race they perceive as a race to the top. Fuck everyone else. I'm gonna rise up the status ladder until 1 million people get hurt.
Well, that's interesting, right? Because the charity piece is like what people do beyond the business, but it's also go back to status and increase the status, right? They're doing it for that perception, right? Well, they might not be ideally doing it, but it's at a subconscious level, or they'll start an organization and then mention it as that. And a lot of this is subconscious, right? A lot of it happens under the hood. Some people could be intentional, but a lot of it does happen at it's a second order of consequence as a result. Yeah. And I always think about that, the first, second, third order of consequences from your actions. Going back to your pursuit, right? Do you think that because you're a pilot and you have photography, do you think you have a different opinion than if you were just a photographer? Because now you still have like the love and the art for it, and you have like almost like an income to accommodate it. But it's also, if you went all in, you could lose the love for what you love.
Yeah, it's a battle that I have every day in my head, and I know it's a battle that many artists have, because pick any art form and it's generally speaking going to be difficult to make money from it. The competition is rife. I mean, we just talked about it. B, just the demand is so low, or the budgets are so low. If you're working with, you might be lucky you get a collector come along and go, I love all your stuff, right? And he's a billionaire.
You don't get into it for that, though.
No, of course not. The intent is just to make. The intent is literally just to make something, right? To make a story, to make a series of something, to make one piece, to make a song, to make a film, or whatever it might be, right? If I'm not saying that is people's intent, most of the time it isn't. It's to make money. But when you're talking about true art, true creativity, and my pursuit, it is, that is the intent behind it. So look, I balance. There have been. I hope my boss isn't watching this, but there's probably been five times in the last 2 years where I've written a resignation letter, just because, not because I don't love the job. I mean, I don't love it as much as I used to, just because we can be so busy sometimes. It's just exhausting. It's not good for my health. I still love flying. It'll always be in my blood, but I want to see where I can get my photography to. And I don't think I can do that until I give everything else up.
Do you want to launch a podcast for your business, but you don't know where to start? Remove the stress, pressure, and all the overwhelm that comes with it by working with Podcast University. If you're an ambitious individual who wants to build your influence online, grow your own podcast, and also stand out from the crowd, Podcast University is for you. We help you with the strategy, equipment, the content, your guests, everything you need to create a top tier podcast. If you want to learn more, check out Podcast University and start your podcast journey today.
Yeah. And just an observation from like what happened with me, right? Was that I was recording podcasts for years, and it is the creative pursuit, right? And it's my actual expression of like how I show up, how I interact, how I learn. It's like my creative outlet. And everything that happened from it was a bonus. Like everything was just like, it was like magic beans or new opportunity, right? It was just like a new thing. But the second I left my job, that went away. And what was replaced with was actually more like anxiety, because it's like, I need to make this to work. Now, I'm not saying this like gets rid of the art. I'm just saying that before, when it was like a magic playground, when I knew I wasn't making 100K a year in finance, we had to make it work. And it didn't change the art. Well, you could argue it did. But what it did was it changed the success metrics. Because before when it was like magic beans when stuff worked, and now when things work at 1,000 times the same result, like we've grown so much more, I don't get that same, kick when it was like a hobby. And this is just a reality. It's not saying that it's right or wrong. It's just what happened, right? And the way I kind of see that is because I went from being like someone who was a hobbyist to someone who's just an entrepreneur. Not just an entrepreneur, but I'm trying to detach the creative side with it, with I need to make this work because I need to exist in the world. And that goes back to human psychology, which is like, we need to fundamentally like actually live. And that means we have that never ending pursuit, right? Because we're so used to that, like innately, that we don't want to die, right? We don't want to be pushed out of the tribe. We also don't want to die. Now that's not going to happen. But when you're alone in your room at 11 o'clock at night, when you need to make this work, that's when those thoughts come in, being like, we need to make it work, right? And when you have that, we need to make it work, that's when people make compromises. Now, I wasn't making compromises, but that's when I've seen people lose the love for what they do for those reasons. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I see it all the time, and that's probably why I haven't made the jump yet.
What you do is so unique that's why, like, this is a unique conversation, because I never had like a photographer on my podcast, because usually whenever I have people like this that like make the jump from 9 to 5, everyone's like, fuck that anyway, and just like run with it, right? And like they're not thinking about it in terms of creativity and art, right? They're like, how do we make this work and replace my income? And that was me. It was like, I wanted to get 50% of my income, 60%. And I did it. And then the second I got 60%, I just left it. I was like, it's grand, get rid of it. And that's kind of the way I kind of think about it from a business perspective, because we want to just live and exist and somehow like not die, basically, right? It's just difficult for me to see like how a creative person or like an artist can excel in like an economic sense when the art is about the art. It's a complete different paradigm.
It's extremely difficult, and I would say there's less than 1% of artists that are able to achieve that.
And just before I finish up on this point is I spoke with Polina Pompliano recently. She wrote a book called Hidden Genius, and she didn't survey. She studied thousands of like people that were at the top of their game, multiple different fields. And one of them, one section of the book was on creativity, and she studied Da Vinci really closely. And what Da Vinci was able to do, or he kind of popularized the idea of two things that are mutually exclusive, and how do we find the binding agent? So he would fuck like yellow against the wall, and then he'd also fuck like an egg against the wall, and he'd watch the egg and the yellow paint run down the wall, and he'd be like, and he'd just stare at it for like an hour, and he'd find something that were two mutually exclusive elements and put them together. And like that's how like, that's not how ideas come from, but it's almost like how you spark something. So let me give you a personal example, helping people with their podcast and me just being a good marketer. They're mutually exclusive, but then they just come together or something like that, right? The reason why I'm saying that is because that's almost what needs to happen for it to be a business as a photographer. You have photography and you have business, and you need to find an intersection. If you are to do that, not to say you have to, I'm saying if you are to do that. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm working on it every day. I've definitely found where I can fit in the photography world. If it ever went to a full-time, I mean, it will. It's just a matter of time. It's going to swap where I do photography way more than I do flying. I'll probably still do a bit of flying, for the rest of my life because it's in my blood. But, the photography business model is you cannot survive, and it does come back to survival. That Neanderthal brain of ours, we might think, oh, we haven't earned enough money this month. We're not going to die, right? But the subconscious says to us that, flight or fight brain. It's like, well, we feel like we're going to die. And that's
you can't override that, right?
You definitely not. It's hardwired into us. So that's why I haven't made the jump yet, because it's too comfortable. I get paid a really good salary, just got a pay rise. Like, fucking hell, like this is making it really difficult for me.
Man, it's diamond handcuffs.
Yeah, it is. But I'm utilizing every minute of my spare time. That's my dog.
It's okay.
Utilizing every minute of my spare time to put something in place where, it's not just about taking photos. That's just my love. And if I can create a business model where I don't need to take other people's photos for them, I'm winning, right? Because then I have the freedom to do things like this, podcasting, where I enjoy it. If I can find a way to monetize that properly, I'm happy, that's the goal. And then the education side of it. So, I talk to a lot of photographers about this, and I've had experiences of doing workshops myself and having clients with me. It's so much joy. It's giving back. It's that fulfillment, satisfaction of seeing progress from someone who, you're passing on your fuck ups in life and your mistakes in photography and saying, these are my mistakes. This is where I don't want you to make the same mistakes. Seeing that, being proud of it. And at the same time, you get to take photos as well. So there's this beautiful kind of symbiotic. Beautiful symbiosis between kind of that what you're talking about, the mix of those worlds. We've got education on one side and photography on the other, right?
But it can be a combination of things. Like, I think
absolutely.
I think my observation of you, right, and we met a few times, right, is that like you don't realize the stuff that you've already done though. I've noticed that like about yourself. You don't realize that like this place, like the coffee shop you have, like it's amazing. Like for anyone that hasn't seen, I put it up on my story a minute ago. Like it's like one of the most beautiful places I've been to in Bali, and it's just a coffee shop downstairs, and everything is like meticulously put together. And I think it's a curse of granted knowledge. I said this on your podcast. We don't recognize how good what we do is because it comes so easy to us. Like when I'm looking at the rocks downstairs, I'm like, where did he get these rocks from? But from you, that's like you just like, oh, volcano. Okay, who gets up there? Who gets this blurry? Bring it down. Let's test it. I think that's the stuff that's undervalued. And like Justin Welsh says, like there's always like $100,000 between your ears that you don't realize. Right. And not to say like that's the whole purpose, but it's the fact that you already have a beautiful coffee shop, right? You already have an amazing studio. You really enjoy photography and you want to have that as a creative pursuit. You can let that be the creative pursuit, just like Kickoff Sessions is to me. Like I don't give a shit about monetizing it through sponsors because I don't need to. Like I'm not like strapped for cash, right? If it comes, whatever, but it's not a force factor. Now I was just very lucky. All right. I was very lucky to be in the position that I'm in. I was someone who was like a scarce mindset just because like didn't grow up with a lot of money, had a lot of businesses that I failed. This one has hit really well. So that has allowed me to. So it's, I've heard this I was told this many times that you can't tell someone with a scarce mindset to just be abundant. You can't tell a broke person, just be full of money, right? And also like same with like UFC. You can't tell like someone who's not in the UFC how important the UFC isn't, but then you have to get there to realize it. So going back around in circles, the stuff that you've already built is already hugely significant. And you just need to almost lean into that. That's just my observation, right? Because like it's already like amazing in the setup you have here. And then allow everything else to be that enjoyment still. Because you will still want to pursue that for the type of brain that you are. You know, you're more, it's really interesting actually, and we can just take a small tangent on this, is the fact that you have a logical brain as a pilot, but then you have a creative pursuit.
Oh yeah, but I'm a really shit pilot.
I don't know about that, man.
I'm worse than I used to be, and I know that, and I'm still extremely safe. And we meet a lot of pilots on the road. We go to simulator where we meet other pilots. We train with them. So you got 15 years in the business. You kind of know where you're at in terms of like quality level. I'm kind of above average, but I'm very fortunate. I work with colleagues who are 10 times better than me, because my love for that's not to say you can be a good pilot. And we'll take a tangent into piloting, but
I like that though.
You can be a good
It's a
pilot.
nice comparison.
Yeah, you can be a good pilot, and you could be an excellent pilot. If you're not an excellent pilot, it doesn't mean you're unsafe or anything. It just means maybe you're not as keen. Maybe you don't have the encyclopedic knowledge that you need to about the aircraft. And there's a lot of ego in piloting, and it's a lot of who knows more. And so there's that aside. But there are a lot more better pilots than me. But that is because when I was 10 years ago, when I was 30, I loved it. It was my life. I got extremely lucky. I mean, I've been extremely lucky throughout my whole life in terms of my upbringing. We didn't have much money either, so it was always like that. Why I went to private school, I don't know how I got a sponsorship. My brother got a sponsorship. My parents scraped every kind of. We had nothing at home, but I had everything at school, and so all I saw were these rich toffs, millionaire parents, and they were coming to school in Porsches and Bentleys. And,
Man, that was
and I'm just going. I'm in my clapped out Vauxhall Corsa, like breaking down every month. I'm just going, this isn't right. So I was always like, I want to be like them. I want to be like them. So that's kind of where the entrepreneurial kind of itch started. But the pilot thing, I mean, it's very logical, but there's also an art to it in itself, because you 75% of it is a computer doing things for you. But if you don't know how to get the best out of that computer, it's the same as your laptop, right? Someone could spend 10 hours writing an email, whereas we might be able to spend 10 seconds writing an email because we know how it works, or we use AI or whatever. We are able to make things, I say we, anyone who's proficient in something can make it extremely efficient to the point where it's a flow. You go back to the football analogy, right? It's 11 people, 22 people on pitch, the team is 11 people. You put them in certain places where it becomes an art form, right? And if you fuck that up, it's just logic, right? So there is a technique, there's a style to piloting, but generally speaking, it's logical. And that is why I fell out of love with it. That is why, I love flying a plane, like hand flying. It's like photography. I love holding a camera and creating something out of it. But everything else is I said, I don't know where that switch came from, but there was always this underlying urge to do something a little bit more creative. And actually I was answering some questions for an interview the other day. They were like, well, where did your pilot, where did the entrepreneur thing come from? It's like, well, I always had it. I had it, I don't know, probably since I was 16, 17, wheeling and dealing, doing silly little stuff, right? Failing one thing after another. But this pressure of parents, money, my love for piloting, like I want to chase that. But there's always this kind of like, all my time off was spent either playing sport or trying like a little business.
Exactly.
Whether it was piano tutoring or a cafe or something like that, all of it, obviously didn't work out. But
are you an entrepreneur who wants to build your influence and authority online? You may have tried some of the hacks and tricks, but none of it has worked. And it makes sense. 90% of podcasts don't make it to episode 3. Of the 10% that are left, 90% of them don't make it to episode 20. That's where Voix comes in. Voix creates, manages, and grows your podcast for you on your behalf. If you've not been getting leads, not been growing consistently, you haven't found your tribe, and you don't know what to do, Voix is the answer. Don't just take our word for it. In the past couple of years, we've managed over 35 podcasts. We've also been able to generate over 55 million views with 500 episodes produced. And not only that, generating over $1 million for our clients in products, services, and sponsorships. So if you want to learn more about how you can build a great podcast and have it fully managed for you, schedule a call with me at Voix, and we will help you achieve your podcast goals.
But that's how you followed status in that realm to get to that point. Influenced by Robert Cialdini, he talks about authority. And when you become a doctor, everyone's like, oh, he's a doctor. It's actually not true. Your doctor lab coat is what brings in status. So if generally people will bow to authority with someone who has the status, just like someone who's a pilot, right? But there's different levels to becoming a doctor, and it depends on how long your lab coat is. So if you have a short lab coat that comes to just below your bottom, you are just an entry-level doctor. If it's a little bit longer, you've passed your residency. And if you're an MD, it's the longest. And people perceive you differently as a result. And actually, there's been lots of malpractice as a result, because people with a longer coat can have a wrong diagnosis of a problem. And then the nurse will implement that because she won't think about it. It's called like the click-run reaction. It's like how like any animal will make click-run changes based on their own habitual like auto like senses. Right, but it comes back to like status and that pursuit, which is kind of like how you got into that space, which is how I got into like the finance world and the tech startup world, because I was following that click run reaction in my brain, which is like, okay, this is obviously the best thing to do. But at the same point, I was always tinkering and changing and moving things on the side.
Were you ever a rebel?
In what?
As in, you didn't like taking orders?
Always. So I was a terrible employee, terrible student. But this is the weird thing about me, is that I'll do the work, but if you tell me to do it, I won't do it.
Exactly the same.
Right. So for context, like I didn't study or anything until I was 17. That blew up my knee. Okay. And at that point I was like pro rugby player. When I blew up my knee, I was told I wouldn't get into any university. So then I left school, just showed up during when I needed to. And I went to the medical library in a university, and I sat there for 2 years learning the past 17 years plus the next 2 years of university work. Okay. And it was because no one told me to do it. I just did it. I turned green. Okay. Got to university. I actually barely scraped into university. They were nearly right. And then the next 4 years, I didn't wait to be told what to do. I'd have like all my final year projects and stuff done. I had my final year project done in November. It was due in May, the following year. And the whole idea was that if someone tells me, I won't do it. And same with business. And I actually just very recently had a call. So I bought into this new program, hired this new mentor. He's like a very like famous like entrepreneur, and the program starts in May 2nd. Is currently.
Can you share who he is?
Shan Hanif. He owns a company called Genflow, and Genflow is like they're one of the biggest agencies in the world. And anyway, I bought into the program recently, and I bought the program in the middle of April, and I was like, hey, can I start early? Just like the course material and stuff. And they were like, oh, that's kind of weird to say, but whatever. They gave me the material. And yesterday I had the onboarding call. And I hopped on the onboarding call, and I was like, yeah, everything's done. I've already implemented all the systems. The team are already using templates. It's already implemented. Here's all the new clients we signed, and here's all the new work we do. And the onboarding guy was like, you are one of the most fucked up people I've ever met in my entire life. You're like, no one has ever finished the material and actually implemented it before the program started. And he was like, why'd you do it? And I was like, because I wanted to do it. But if you had told me to do it, I wouldn't have done it. And it's just such a weird dilemma, right? And that's just been the nature of being an entrepreneur.
Can you get me another coffee?
But it's the nature of being an entrepreneur, though, right? And I imagine that's
it is. I asked because I hate having a boss, and my boss is like one of the nicest bosses I've ever worked for. He's legit legend for a multi-millionaire. I just don't like. I hate being told what to do, and I can feel my wife's eyes right on me now, burning a hole in my face. I'm the hardest worker in the room. You know, if it's something that no one tells me to do, and I'm just like, well, this needs to be done. I'm going to do this, and I want to create this, and then I add this onto my plate, and add this on. So I want to do it. I want to do it. Someone tells me to do something, like, fuck off. No, I just won't do it. It's weird. I've been like that since I was a child. My dad was very strict. He's a military guy, so he was very strict. I must be something from there. I'm not getting into psychology too much, but yeah, it must be something like that emanated from there where when I went to university, and I don't know everyone goes crazy at uni, but I was like freedom, rebelled, and I kind of haven't stopped since. I mean, I'm still professional and respectable, but you know what I mean? It's like I want to go and prove myself all the time. I want to go and create something for myself all the time. It's all about creating something, making something, and that fulfillment of creating something that you're proud of. It's like a drug. It's a feedback loop, right? And that's why putting stuff out to the world and getting the feedback, like the signals, is what's most addictive, and also is a blessing and a curse, right? Because there's two sides to that. Is like you want to go achieve something really big and get that fulfillment that you have for yourself, not the validation, separation with that, but just mean that's the purpose, that's the pursuit of creation, right? And building. That's what I feel. Is like I'm definitely not in like the super small startup phase anymore, but that's where most people like romanticize the most, right? They're building something, they're getting something off the ground. And that's why you see a lot of people struggle going 1 to 10 because they've lost like the kind of like essence for it. But it's 1 to 10 that makes
this is an interesting point to get into actually. It's like, I would argue that like a lot of the magic comes in that phase, whether you're an artist or whatever, because when you start something new, you get those newbie gains. And there's a graph called the emotional state of change, which is like in the beginning, you get uninformed optimism. It's like, this is great, I love photography. And then you get like the realization of what's happening. And then you're in at the trough of misery and you're like, well, what the fuck's happening with photography? And then when you stay in that like horrific pool, you come out the other end with it's like something enlightenment or some shit. But that's like basically how you like learn a skill or whatever, right? But I've just got really, really good at like loving the pain. And I've always had a really high pain threshold. Entrepreneurs generally do. Just embarrassment, fear, struggle, like the anxiety of not knowing, the change, the state of change internally came from sport. Came from multiple different things. So that usually when I'm at that trough, I'm quite familiar with staying in the pain, which is what has let me in the small pursuits that I do come out the other end. So I'd kind of get your thoughts on that too, because like learning something is hard, right? And
I don't think people these. I mean, God, I do sound like an old man. I'm listening to myself.
I agree with you 100%.
People don't want to suffer for anything these days. And coming back to, you touched upon mastery, and I want to go into that at some point, but I feel like that's such a rare thing these days. I was speaking to a fellow photographer from podcast this morning, and he's been a wedding photographer for 20 years. I mean, 20 years of weekends shooting someone else's weddings. And he's fucking good at it. Like, it's just second nature to him. He's perfectly happy, but he does it, right? Not for the photography. He does it to share people's love, like to be part of a very special day. It's not about the images, it's not about the photography, it's not about the money, definitely not about the money. And so, what was your question?
I would say like learning a new skill and going through the pain of it, but then staying with it, because like Peter Thiel, like famous like investor, talks about like 0 to 1. And I honestly don't think 0 to 1 is hard, because I think that getting into something is exciting. I think 1 to 10 is like the worst position possible.
Yeah, I talk about the patience of consistency all the time. And I see the most successful people, and they not only consistent, they have the patience to be consistent over a stretch of time.
Infinite game.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think we certainly, you're an outlier, but you're the only 28-year-old I've met, 28-year-old I've met recently who just sees the world in a very mature way that isn't like, I need this now, I need this now, I need this now, and then that now, and then, what's that person doing? I need to be like them. And there's, and I don't blame the younger generation at all. If I grew up with what we have today in terms of the social medias and just the vacuous nature of every bit of information that comes across your desk, I would be the same. Like, I'm bordering on that anyway now. So I don't see the pursuit of mastery anymore. I don't see the pursuit of suffering because true genius and true mastery comes from suffering, comes from pain, right? We live in a world of abundance, so we have to go out and actually create some kind of suffering, some kind of difficulty. We actually have to go out, certainly someone like me who's been privileged all my life, you have to go out and put yourself in difficult positions every day. You have to go and make a dick out of yourself every day. You have to go and be prepared to be wrong every day, and then admit that you're wrong, and just go again and go again and go again and go again. That is the only way I see the most successful people in the world, whatever industry, creating that success from. No one gets rich quick. It's a cliche, but they don't.
Yeah. Well, it's the 10 years of absolutely brutal pain to get to that point whereby you win, right? And that's why I think the reason why I would try to have like a unique opinion on this is because when you're already trying and you're out on your own, you're already winning. You're already ahead of 99% of people. So if you hear all this shit and people say like your photos suck or whatever the feedback is, it's like those guys are not people you want to get feedback from. I have some like people in our network that are ultra successful, right? And like have made a huge business and everything. And I actually care about their opinion because they've gone and done the stuff that I want to go achieve. So if they say something to me and we're like, hey, you should do it this way or specific, or maybe I didn't like it the way you had like this, I'm like, oh, that's good feedback. It's good feedback. But all the other stuff where most people get caught up on, like all the worries, all the pain and stuff, that is all, again, back to status. They feel like that they can't let that go, right? But I've kind of already kind of eliminated that. So for me, it's more like the infinite game, mastery, pursuing something, going all in on something. Because what I said this on a newsletter recently was like, sometimes people just want to be around people who are obsessed with stuff. And because we live in a life of mediocrity whereby everyone is average, right? So if you find someone who is just obsessed with something, people will stick to it. So Zach Pogreb is a perfect example of this. His word is obsession. He follows obsession. So he's obsessed now with, he was a bodybuilder, I think, and now he's obsessed with marathon running. He's trying to run like a sub 240 marathon, 6'3", 200 pound, right? And the reason why I'm saying this is because I've had clients who have stayed with me because they just think that I'm like addicted to what I'm doing. And you want to be about it, right? Whatever about the business, but you want to be about the thing. So that's why we can kind of sit there and go over this stuff, whatever, because I'm just generally like obsessed with the object. And for me, that came through a lot of pain, right? Because I was in startups, went to big companies, went to smaller companies, was trying different stuff. And then it was only until I found the podcast, which I was like, this is something I can throw my entire life at, irrespective of outcome, just because I enjoyed the pursuit. And that's allowed me to play the infinite game, right? And that's taken a bit of time, of course, but that's why I'm very hesitant to start new stuff, because I only want to start stuff that it's on that infinite game. And we actually have only got to that realization recently with a few things that I'm working on in the business right now. It's like, this is something that we can definitely do infinitely. Let's do it. Versus like, I don't know, not a get rich quick scheme, but 2 new things you could start, which look like good opportunities, but they're not aligned to what you want to do. So,
and that's really, really important is and Simon Scribb talks about this, like number 1 rule, do what you love. Like find that everyone has something in their life that they love. And it doesn't have to be like a business venture. It could just be planting flowers, or it could be walking a dog, or it could just do something that you love, figure out something you love. And if you end up, the more you think about that and you decide, I want to create a business, something, right? Start with something you love and then figure out how that might form over a period of time. And I think that it's super important when it comes to photography, that the best photographers who I know are obsessed with it. They just, and I am, I think about it every day. I love it. I just love it, right? I love everything about it. If you have that, maybe obsession might be the wrong word, maybe it's suitable for you, but if you have just that passion, like the passion for what you do, everything else just honestly just doesn't matter. Because as long as you maintain that passion and you don't get distracted like you're talking about, which is super easy to do, right? Well, I've got to do that and I've got to do that, and maybe I should do that just to hedge my bets. It's like, no. If you really truly want to, if you're able to identify a goal, then the only way you can pursue that goal is with passion, with choosing something you really, really want to do, and the rest you'll figure out. You really will. Not only that, people see that passion and what you're talking about. Like, you attract, people want to work with you because they see it. And I've had this in my last business. We were so passionate about our business in Hong Kong, which was a chain of gyms. We just loved we lived it day in, day out for years, nonstop for years. And we would get investors because they were just like, well, I just want to invest in you. I don't care about the business. Like, I'm not investing in the business. I want to invest in you. I want to be around you. People wanted to be around us because we were just infectious. We just wanted to talk about this all the time, right? And for the majority of people, they don't want anything to do with that, right? It's not their space. It's not their interest. Like, it's boring. Oh God, they're talking about that again. But the people who had a level of interest in it, right? They want to be around you. They want to be around people like this. They want to be around.
Repel though as well, right? You want to repel other people, right?
Of course.
And you've probably seen that too, like over the years as you got more into photography. Your old mates that you used to go to the pub with, they're like,
yeah,
Matt's kind of weird. He does all this photo stuff.
When I started getting into photography, I got so much shit from my mates. When I started putting videos on YouTube and posting on Instagram and just having a digital presence, and then starting the podcast and stuff like that. And now it's just quiet.
Would you say that they're not like mates anymore, or they were on the peripherals?
They were peripheral.
Yeah, and that's happened to me, right? So, and how I describe it is kind of funny is that when you launch, people are like, oh, well done. And actually
want you to fail.
Yeah, actually, I think I went through this with you before, was the fact that when you leave your job, everyone claps, but they clap because they see you as a perceived drop in status, that now they're beneath you because Matt doesn't make money anymore, right? Yep. And then they think, oh, well, he's over there. This is subconscious. It's not really conscious. Sometimes it is conscious. But then as you grind, you're in a fucking warehouse for like 4 years straight. When they see the TechCrunch article, then it's insecurity because now he's up here. Right. And he's done all the work while I was in the shit job and I was sitting there in London buying mortgages and getting kids and stuff.
Yeah, but most of the time they don't think you worked hard for it.
Well, that too, right? But
go, oh, he's just got given that. And
that's why they would kind of stop engaging with you as a result, right? And if I was to look at my followers of Instagram, which I don't really care about, but I would guarantee you that none of my hometown people that I live with follow me. I would nearly guarantee it for that exact reason. Because I've just been on my own for a very long time building.
But that's why things like Instagram are just so bad, right? They are making society like that, and we're talking the majority of the global population now are like that. They get jealous like that, right? They think that what they see on Instagram is reality or a broad version of reality, whereas it's just a snapshot or a fake snapshot at best. So I'm definitely not going to go down the social media route. But on that note, had this discussion with a potential client, but a guy who's kind of learning the photography techniques, but just kind of dipping his toes in the photography world, figuring out whether he wants to make the move. And we got into the social media argument, and he was like, yeah, look, I'm trying to grow my social media and putting good photos, and his photos are great, but he's getting wrapped up with this status. He's getting wrapped up with the validation, and he's and this is so many people, right? Put a photo on there and he said, I think he's got like 7,000 followers or something, which is amazing. If they're all real followers.
You saw them in a room.
Fucking amazing. And that was my thing. He said, I got 5 likes on a photo. I said, yeah, but if you showed your photo in this studio and with 5 people around, how proud would you be? Like I'd take that any day of the week to show some of my photos to 5 people. What a day. Fantastic. But we forget because it was just a digit, right? You think about YouTube subscribers, we got 68,000, like put them in a stadium and get them to listen to you, right? That's incredible. We just forget, we just see a digit, right? So it's the perception of what is reality. And I guess that's, a different topic for a different day when it comes to social media.
Talk to me about the trip you did was it Abu Dhabi? Outside Abu Dhabi in the desert. Yeah,
it was a couple of years ago now. Again, sparked from just a desire to tell a story that, most of my photography is based around stories that maybe people haven't heard about of other people that maybe people haven't heard about around the world. And is why travel is such a good educator. When you get to meet people, which I have done in a privileged position, flying around the world myself and meeting other people from other cultures and learning more about that makes my desire to go and kind of capture those stories even stronger. So yeah, the nihilist in me thinks that the world is pretty much on its back in terms of nuanced cultures, minority populations, ethnic groups around the world. We live in a place now that's full of it, really, but it's dwindling as well. You take many African countries, take pretty much the whole of those Emiratis, the UAE states, all completely commercialized and westernized now. Whereas 10, 20, 50 years ago, a lot of different tribes, Bedouins and sub-tribes of the Bedouin culture were, living these fascinating, authentic lives in the desert off nothing. So I wanted to go and see if I could find some of them, and I was actually there with work and had a week in between trips, and I just stayed there. And it was pretty much a failure of a trip. I ended up in Oman. I ended up driving. Dubai, Abu Dhabi, all of those tribes are gone. So they've been sucked from the desert through both climate change and globalization, sucked from the desert into the cities because cities pay and the desert's getting drier, so the camels can't feed. And so there was just, going to the desert, there's nothing, right? So my story had, ended before it even begun. After like 4 or 5 days of just meeting people, recce's, researching, I found some places in Oman, which is about from Dubai, it's about a 6-hour drive just across the border. So rent a car. No, usually my projects are pretty well planned. I've got a fixer on the ground. I know what story I'm trying to tell. I know what people I'm trying to capture. This was different. It was, I ended up on this weird island on the northern tip of Oman, finding these people that still kind of live this authentic, very old way of living and refuse to kind of go onto the mainland and be globalized and homogenized with the rest of society. So yeah, that was fun. And they were, just often they, as in these types of people, are often the nicest people you'll ever meet, just so humble. And we live in a place now where, we talk about status and stuff. They don't give a fuck about. There are a lot of people here that obviously want a paycheck. It's just human nature. But when you talk about status and an image and validation, it's not endemic to the whole of society. I just feel like in the West, it's just a almost cancer of our society where we're just constant need to rise up.
It's Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
I actually heard something super interesting on this before. It was like, there was a guy, I should really get the name, but he was going into the Amazon to find these tribes that are being like untapped, like no one's going to access them, or they had mild access to the outside world. For the most part, they wanted to be their own. And they searched, and they eventually found the tribe. And when they went there, a lot of them had like infections in their feet because they used to climb the trees. So like these really bad infections. The average lifespan was like 26, 25. They had really bad not heart disease, but a lot of like diseases, infections and whatnot. And they asked them the question, being like, I didn't ask them the question. They like surveyed them of like what they wanted, and they wanted electricity. They wanted access to water, to clean food. So it was almost like they were protecting their tribal instincts, but they actually wanted to move away from it, even within that ecosystem community. And I thought it was a very interesting observation, because it was like, we thought that they wanted to be on their own, but they were like, no, we're just very remote, that we actually do want the outside influence, which is kind of interesting. As you go back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, they couldn't satisfy the base level, which was food, security, water. But then when they had satisfied that with electricity, that was a solution. It was like hydro water and whatnot. The next one came up then. I just thought that was very interesting to analyze, because like I'm with you on that, right? Is that we need to almost like preserve like the way things were done in the past.
No, I'm not saying that at all. I understand. I understand what is happening and what will happen. It's just sad. Yeah. It's just that it's sad that for me as a photographer who gets drawn to cultural portraits and cultural, nuances and documenting that, I feel like the beauty in life, and certainly the beauty in humanity, comes from those differences. Now, if we're all, have you been to China? 100% homogenized, right? It's and it's deliberately built like that. It's 1 billion people that live. Okay, there are some, I'm completely generalizing a whole huge population here, but generally speaking, they've built a system where everyone's kind of equal in some way or another. Everyone's the same. Well, they're kind of trying to buy out the remote areas, but generally speaking, it's the buildings all look the same. Everything's gray. It's, you can't have many flash cars. All the cars are roughly the same. It's just that's how it describes. Ugh. It's just I don't want
under a big Asian city, right?
And now you put your head above the parapet, you get it chopped off, right? So it's like, we want to celebrate difference. We want to celebrate nuanced perspectives. We want to celebrate conversation. We want to celebrate different opinions, as long as they're responsible and intelligent and informed. We want to celebrate different ways of life. And I feel like we are losing that, or at least we're not respecting it. So where you might find tribes that are very grateful for, the basic human needs, there are plenty of tribes and subcultures out there that don't want their land being bought, that don't want the next power station to come on their land, that they don't want the government to just push them out because they need land. I mean, every country you go to nowadays is we have to feed the growing population, right? Feed them with housing, feed them with food, feed them with more cattle, feed them with just everything. It's just a world of supply, right? We've got to fit everyone into boxes somewhere. And all that means is that we're going to take away the beauty in the world, whether we're going to implode it for ourselves or we're actually going to steal it from those specialties. I don't know. But for me personally, and I'm not arguing that it's a wrong thing for us to do that, because it's human nature. We have to evolve. We have to progress. Doesn't mean we can't do it in a responsible and
it's the survival versus the like taking advantage dilemma, right? We go back to in the beginning, like you make the actions because you want to survive, but you've gone so far past survival because life is so easy that everything else added on. Like the next massive building being built is not being built out of survival.
Absolutely.
Do you get me? That's the difference.
Greed.
Exactly. Whereas like if we were in somewhere like Indonesia, I was in Sumba recently and it was beautiful. Like
we're going in a couple of weeks.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so beautiful.
Where did you stay? We have to pick your brains.
God knows where I stayed. Like everything is like, it's like it's very tribal. Tribal instincts,
that's
right?
one reason why I want to go.
And without, absolutely tarnishing the way they actually
But it
live.
won't be for much longer.
Exactly. But the way that it's set up right now is like, even the culture there, even the landscape there, it's just so beautiful. And I see that small murmurs of like, there's stuff being built. Like for instance, there's like a Ritz-Carlton or some shit on there. There's one, at least what's the name of the place? The hotel that's there? The Nihi. Yeah.
That'd be amazing.
Which is like $1,000 a night or whatever. But that's over like there.
Is that where you stayed?
No, God, no. Stayed in a hut for like, still like $50 a night, but it was a hut. Okay, so where I'm going with that is just the fact that like that's what, it's interesting because one of the clients we have in our portfolio, they have like a climate change podcast, and one of the guys that was on it made a really good point. It's like, all of our phones screensavers and our laptop screensavers are of nature, right? And we're like searching for that, and we fly across the world to get to a pristine beach and all this kind of stuff. But we're actually dissolving the stuff that we actually want to get to, right? Or we're working so hard, and it's like, oh,
the irony is,
we need to like build a business and sell the business to be able to get on the beach or to be able to go into nature. But it's like we already have access to these things, and the best things in life are free, right?
I fly a plane, mate. Like it's not helping anyone. I mean, I don't eat meat. Hopefully, kind of counteract that. That's also another conversation. But yeah, I think like it's just sad. I'm not sat here saying I know the answers, but I know when I go to islands like Celaya and Sulawesi, or even the Maldives, or some of the most beautiful places on earth, and you see waves of and Bali. I mean, go down to Uluwatu and in the right season on the right side of the island, you can just see waves of trash. It's like, what the fuck are we doing? Where's the responsibility and where's the education? And that's where the Western world, the richer nations, need to take more responsibility. And that's why the erosion of beauty is just so sad, and it's all man-made.
That's interesting. So how do you action that before we finish up? Like what can someone do so they understand this, they realize it. What's the lesson?
Give
here?
10% of their income away every month.
To what?
To something they believe in, or if you're not sure, you can go to websites like Effective Altruism who can actually vet charities for you, who have vetted charities for you over extensive investigative periods where they basically audit charities, make sure, because that's what people's biggest concern is.
100%.
How do I know if my money is going to get used appropriately? And so the argument with effective altruism is, and I'm not a staunch supporter of it, but we I kind of take part in it, I guess. But the argument is, rather than you go and, let's say, work at a dog charity and rescue dogs, if you've got the income to pay for 10 people to do that, and you not do it, right? So if you stay in a job, let's say I stay in my job that I don't like, but that brings in a good enough salary to put 10x the amount of money somewhere that's trusted and that can leverage that money better than me giving up that job and going to do it myself. That's the whole premise behind it. For 10% of my income, like, no brainer. Like, I'd rather suffer in a job that I don't like and not be a martyr or anything, but just be like, well, I'd rather do that and help that way than me kind of reassess my whole kind of life choices. And absolutely much bigger impact. But, I understand, and we've been there. It's like, well, I don't really know where to put money, so I'm just going to keep it, So, but that's really where people can help. Education's the other thing. It's like, just educate yourself. It's free. It's not difficult. Get off TikTok and just read a book, read an article, watch a podcast for 3 minutes. It's going to serve you better than than anything else. And I don't know how to get that message across to people, because I understand it's an addictive pursuit, but education for me is the key to all of our solutions.
If you think about like people in America, like 60% have never left America or don't have a passport or some shit. Like obviously
try 80 don't have a passport.
Yeah, right. Their exposure to what's going on in the world is so small. It's within their hometown, right? Some people, for whatever means, can't travel, whatever. But I just mean the exposure you've had to the world, and like with myself, and like obviously you're a pilot, so you've flown a lot more than me. But just seeing that it's almost like an obvious choice. But mostly people, like you experience it through exposure, basically. You realize what you need to make a change on by just having that experience and doing it.
But I mean, I think that's a bit of a cop out.
True. But that's why they don't realize it, though. Do you get me?
They don't realize it because they
haven't seen it.
You don't have to see stuff to be curious about things. I mean, they see everyone in the US has got a TV, right? So everyone in the US has got internet. And so there is nothing stopping them to go, well, what else is out there? They know that there's other countries, they just can't travel, right? Or they don't choose not to. Yeah, that's true. Point where the UK is. So yeah, I mean, I get that, and there is a lot of responsibility that should be placed on government, that should be placed on media companies. I mean, you think about how many people actually control what people see. Let's take the US. We're talking like 3 or 4 major companies. It's like the food industry, right? Same thing. It's like you can have so many brands and so many labels and so many sub companies, but at the top is like 3 or 4 companies,
100%
media companies. So you've got these people dictating what information gets disseminated where. We take Elon, for example. I mean, how much does he control in terms of narrative and information that gets out there, right? Well, a hell of a lot. How many companies does he own that's worth over $1 billion? I mean, a few.
Who's invested in the companies?
Well, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, look, I don't blame anyone. There's no blame here at all. I just feel like the responsibility can be shared. And I think as long as we've got the intent, we as in society have an intent, both on an individual level and on a tribal level, to do the right thing. It sounds like a cliche, but it's really that simple. But it's too easy not to.
I get you. I want to say a massive thank you. It's a great session. There's a lot of different things we could have got into as well, which we're going to need a second round.
Yeah, I'm sure we will.
I think Fia and Elise are going to lose their mind if we spend any longer. Man, a massive thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it, man.